Samuel Cross limped down the dirt path toward the house he'd built with blood, sweat, and dreams too big for his calloused hands. The war had taken his leg, half his hearing, and nearly his faith, but not the memory of her, Clara, the woman who'd promised to wait. His uniform hung loose on his frame, boots scuffed to the sole, and his crutch dug hard into the gravel with every step. The summer wind smelled of wheat and home. But something was wrong. The smoke from the chimney curled lazily, as if the house hadn't known grief. A stallion he didn't recognize chewed oats by the barn, and laughter, low, masculine laughter, drifted through the open window. Samuel's chest tightened. He moved faster, ignoring the stabbing pain in what remained of his right leg. When he reached the porch, he paused. Her voice came through the door, soft, familiar. Then his blood froze. A second voice followed. Cal Whitaker, the man Samuel had once called brother in arms, until Cal abandoned their unit under fire, leaving Samuel to bleed out in the dirt. Samuel had cursed him with his last conscious breath. Now that voice filled his home. He didn't knock. He opened the door. Inside, Clara sat at the table, dress unwrinkled, eyes wide. Cal stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. They turned together, like a painting of betrayal. "Sam," Clara's voice broke. "You weren't supposed to be here yet." Cal stepped forward, his grin dying. "Well, hell, Cross. Guess the war didn't kill you after all." "No," Samuel said, eyes locked on him. "But maybe it should have. Would have saved me from this." Clara rose, tears already brimming. "It's not what it looks like?" "Isn't it?" Samuel said, crutch creaking beneath him. "Because it looks like you took the man who left me for dead and gave him everything I bled for." Silence crashed over the room. Samuel's hand twitched near the pistol at his hip. "Get out," he said, voice calm but jagged. "Both of you." Cal scoffed. "This house was empty for years. You were dead, Cross." "Then let me show you how ghosts settle scores," Samuel whispered. And in that moment, with heartache louder than any gunfire, he knew this wasn't the end of war. It was the start of another kind. Clara didn't move. Neither did Samuel. The room was a bomb between them, silence ticking like a trigger. Cal's smirk faded when Samuel stepped forward, slow and deliberate, crutch striking the floor with each step like a judge's gavel. "You were dead," Cal said again, weaker now. "Your name was on the list." Samuel's eyes never left Clara. "Is that why you filled my side of the bed so fast?" Her lips trembled. "I waited, Sam. A year. 2. There were no letters. No word. I thought—" "You thought wrong," he snapped. "You thought of yourself. Not of me, lying in mud with a hole in my leg and your name on my lips." Cal put a hand on Clara's arm, and Samuel's fist clenched. "Get your hand office my wife." "She's not yours anymore," Cal growled, stepping forward. "She chose me. I was here. You weren't." Samuel's laugh came sharp and bitter. "You mean you stayed behind? You ran while the rest of us bled. And now you've got my land, my name on the deed, and my wife's heart?" "I saved her," Cal said. "From loneliness, from wasting her life on a man who wasn't coming home." Clara's voice cracked. "I didn't know you were alive, Sam." "Then why is his coat hanging on my hook?" he barked. "Why is his name on the barn, his boots under the bed, and his filth in your mouth?" She flinched. But Samuel didn't. Not now. Not after burying friends whose last words were about going home. This was home? This betrayal, painted in her eyes and signed with Cal's smug presence? "You have until sunset," he said, voice low. "To get off my land, take him. Take whatever shame you carry, just don't leave it here." Cal stepped forward, chest puffed. "Or what, soldier?" "You'll hobble after me?" Samuel's eyes turned to steel. "Try me." The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was recognition. Clara's tears spilled, but Samuel had none left. Cal led her out with curses under his breath, and the door slammed behind them like a coffin sealed. Samuel stood alone in his home, empty now, but finally honest. And as the wind cut through the window crack, he whispered, "The war just changed uniforms." Samuel didn't sleep that night. He sat by the hearth, fire dying low, staring at the photograph on the mantel. Clara in a white dress, sunlight in her hair, holding his hand as if it could anchor her through time. That woman was gone. Or maybe, he thought grimly, she was never real to begin with. At sunrise, he stepped outside, the crutch clicking over the boards, pain a constant companion now. Less in the leg, more in the ribs where betrayal had carved its name. He went to the well, the one he'd dug with his father, and stared into the water's dark eye. It reflected a man he barely knew, gaunt, ghost-pale, eyes hollowed by war and return. He took the wedding photo from his coat, kissed it once without knowing why, then let it fall. The water swallowed it with barely a ripple. That's where love lived now. Buried, silent, unreachable. Behind him a voice rasped from the trees. "That the welcome you give a man home from hell?" Samuel turned slowly, hand on his pistol, but the figure stepping forward raised both arms. "Easy now. I'm not here for blood. Just heard the soldier came back to a rattlesnake's den." It was Jed Harrow, the blacksmith's boy turned bounty hunter, eyes sharp as a hawk, one arm in a sling. "You look like hell," Jed muttered. "Fits, don't it?" Samuel said. "You here to sell condolences?" Jed shook his head. "Came to say Cal's name's showing up in more than just your nightmare. He's running with a crew out west. Stagecoach robbers, horse thieves, killers." Samuel's grip tightened on the well's edge. "And Clara?" Jed hesitated. "She's not the girl who cried at your wedding. Word is she's knee-deep in it, helping him launder loot through towns that don't ask questions." Samuel looked out toward the ridge, where two silhouettes had disappeared the day before. "I thought she broke my heart," he muttered. "Turns out she tried to kill it." "What'll you do?" Jed asked. "They're riding east." "Then so am I," Samuel said, turning back toward the house. "Not for revenge." "Then for what?" Samuel paused at the door. "For truth. For every soldier who came home to find the war never really ended." And with the morning sun cutting like a blade across the valley, Samuel began to prepare. Not to mourn, but to hunt. 3 days later, Samuel rode hard across the open plains, the wind bitter against his skin, the crutch tied tight against his saddle. The pain in his leg screamed with every jolt, but the fury in his chest burned louder. He tracked them by campfires left too warm, by barked names in saloons, by whispers bought with coin, and the shadow of his old war medals. Each town told the same story. Cal Whitaker swaggering through, Clara at his side, her eyes darker, her laughter colder. They were legends now, outlaws wrapped in romance, wearing stolen freedom like badges. In Bent Hollow, he found their scent thick in the dust. The bartender wouldn't meet his gaze, but a boy in the alley did. "You looking for the man with the black gloves?" the boy asked. "He called your name when he threw a bottle through that window. Said the cripple was coming." Samuel knelt, pressing a coin into the boy's hand. "Where did they go?" "East," the boy said. "Said they'd burn the next town if it looked at 'em wrong." That night, Samuel camped beneath a twisted cottonwood and stared at the stars as he cleaned his revolver. He remembered Cal's voice during the war, joking, lying, promising to hold the line. He remembered Clara's hands on his face, telling him she'd wait. You don't love them less, he whispered into the dark. You just learned they never loved you right. In the morning, a rider caught up to him. Jed Harrow again, dust on his face and worry in his eyes. You sure about this? Jed asked. Men like Cal don't just run. They dig in. They make it personal. It already is, Samuel said. You ever watch a man die beside you, only to wake up and see the coward who left you holding your wife's hand? Jed said nothing. Samuel climbed back into the saddle, voice steel. He'll see me. Not the broken man he tried to bury, not the husband he thought he replaced. He'll see the ghost of every sin he thought he got away with. And as they rode east, the sky turned gray, the wind colder. The final confrontation was drawing near, and Samuel didn't need justice. He needed truth, and he was ready to drag it out of the barrel if he had to. They found it 2 days later. A ranch tucked between twin hills, wrapped in white fences and soaked in money that smelled of stolen things. Horses in the corral wore cavalry brands filed down. The house was 2 stories tall, too proud for the land, like a monument to something unearned. Samuel and Jed approached at dusk, the sun throwing long shadows that slithered across the porch. You sure you want to knock? Jed asked. Might be cleaner if we burn it down. I want to look him in the eyes, Samuel said. I want him to see me. The front door opened before they reached it. Clara stood in the doorway, wearing silk instead of sorrow, her hair pinned like a politician's wife. You came, she whispered, not as surprise, but almost relief. You shouldn't have. Still saying that even now? Samuel asked. After everything? You left me, she said, and I did what I had to. I bled on French soil, he growled. For a flag, for a future, for you? She stepped aside. He's in the study, but if you go in there, you won't leave the same. I already didn't, he said, brushing past her. Cal Whitaker stood with his back to the fire, a glass of whiskey in hand. Was wondering when you'd find us, he said without turning. You always were the stubborn type. Turn around, Cal, Samuel said, his hand on his gun. Turn around and lie to my face like you did when you left me in that crater. Cal turned, older, meaner, but still smug, still crooked. You think this is about you? He said. Clara was mine the moment you stopped being useful. You died, Sam. I just wrote the ending. Then I'm here to rewrite it, Samuel said. With lead. Cal laughed once. She won't let you do it. She loves me now. Then let her stop me, Samuel said. Let her speak a word in your defense. Silence. Behind him, Clara said nothing. Not one word. Cal's smile cracked. Samuel stepped forward. That's what I thought. And in that breathless moment, with everything he'd ever lost standing in front of him, Samuel raised the gun. Not with rage, but with clarity. Because some wars don't end. They just come home wearing familiar faces. Cal's eyes narrowed as the revolver inched upward, its barrel a judgment Samuel had waited too long to deliver. The fire behind Cal crackled softly, but there was no warmth in the room, only the burn of betrayal and the silence of a wife who'd made her choice. You think you'll feel better? Cal sneered. You think this'll fix you? I'm not broken, Samuel said. I was bent by war, by pain, by the lie you wore like a second skin, but I've never been clearer. Cal moved, slow and calculated, his hand drifting toward the drawer. You won't shoot, he said. You're not that man. No, Samuel replied. But you are. In a flash, Cal lunged for the drawer, but the sound came first. Samuel's shot rang through the room, crisp and final. Cal jerked back, eyes wide, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He dropped to his knees, coughing once, eyes full of disbelief. I told you, Samuel said quietly. Some ghosts get to finish what the war started. Cal fell with a soft thud, face frozen in surprise. Samuel stood still, the gun heavy in his hand, but his chest strangely light. Clara stepped forward, pale, trembling. "You killed him?" "No," Samuel said. "He killed himself a long time ago. I just buried what was left." She reached for him. "Sam, please! I didn't know what to do. I was alone. I thought you were—" "Don't," he said, backing away. "You made your choices. All I did was survive them." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Do you hate me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Number, hating you would mean I still loved you." Then he turned, walking past the ghost of what they'd been, out into the cold night air where Jed waited by the horses. "Is it done?" Jed asked. "It's over," Samuel said. "Not just him, her too." Jed nodded. "Where to now?" Samuel looked toward the horizon, the stars beginning to blink through the darkness. Home. Somewhere new. Not built on lies this time. And as they rode into the night, Samuel didn't look back. Some men return from war to find everything gone. Others burn it down and start again, not for revenge, but for the quiet peace that only truth can plant in scorched soil. They rode until the stars gave way to a bruised dawn, and Samuel felt each mile peel away the past like scabs off an old wound. He didn't speak much, and Jed didn't press him. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was earned. At a crossroads by a weeping willow, Jed reined in. "I've got business west," he said. "A bounty. Not your kind of clean." Samuel nodded. "Then this is where we part." "You going back to the homestead?" Jed asked. Samuel shook his head. "That place died before I came home." "You still got your name. That's more than most." Samuel looked out over the rising plains. "Maybe it's time I leave the name behind too." "Then who are you now?" Jed asked. Samuel's voice came quiet but certain. "A man with nothing left to bury." Jed tipped his hat. "That's worth something." And with a final nod, the bounty hunter rode off into the dust, leaving Samuel alone at the fork. He took the left path, south, towards the open valleys where no one knew his story. He stopped in a small town called Ember Creek, a place where the streets were quiet, and the people didn't ask too many questions. He traded his revolver for lumber and built a cabin by the edge of the river, one plank at a time. The work was slow, painful, but it was honest. He wrote no letters, left no markers, and when townsfolk asked where he came from, he'd just say, "Far enough." Months passed. The limp remained, but it no longer led him. And one spring morning, as the snow finally gave way to green, a woman brought bread to his porch, a widow with sharp eyes and a child who smiled like he'd never been taught to fear men. She didn't ask about the past, just left the bread and said, "Everyone deserves a warm meal, even the quiet ones." Samuel watched them walk away, something flickering in his chest. Not love, not yet, but possibility. And that was enough. He sat on the porch, bread warm in his hand, and whispered to no one, "I came home once and found hell. Maybe now I'll build heaven, one nail at a time." And for the first time in years, the war inside him did not answer. The seasons turned slowly in Ember Creek, each one folding gently into the next like pages in a book written without sorrow. Samuel's cabin stood firm by the river, a simple place with no pictures on the wall, but peace in every board. He worked the land with his hands, grew corn and squash, and repaired boots for those too poor to replace them. Word spread through the town, not about his past, but about his silence, his fairness, and the way he looked every man in the eye without flinching. One evening, as golden light dipped across the fields, the widow returned, not with bread, but with seeds. "You've got a strong patch of soil," she said. "Would be a shame not to use it." Samuel nodded, and together they planted beside the river. Her son ran between the rows, laughing, throwing dirt in wide arcs like a painter with a brush. "He thinks you're a hero," she said. Samuel paused, hands deep in earth. "I'm not." "That's what makes it true," she replied. He looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't beautiful in the way Clara had been. She was present, steady, unafraid of quiet. When the sun vanished and the stars crept in, she didn't leave. They sat on the porch, listening to frogs in the reeds and the wind in the trees. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "Whatever life came before this?" Samuel shook his head. "That life was built on lies. This one, I built with my own hands." She smiled. "Then maybe it's time to give it a name." "I gave up mine," he said. "What's a man without a name?" "Free," she said. And for the first time in a long time, Samuel felt something stir that wasn't rage or regret. It was hope, a fragile, growing thing, a seed of peace. Later, when he lay alone in bed, he thought of Clara. But only briefly. Not with pain, but with distance, like remembering a fire that no longer burned. He had buried many things. But tonight, as the wind hummed through his window and the scent of fresh earth clung to his hands, he realized something. He was no longer surviving. He was living. And that, at last, was enough. Summer came in waves, warm and generous, and Samuel's days fell into rhythm. Sunrise at the field, hammer by noon, stories with the widow's boy at dusk. They spoke little of the past. It wasn't needed. The town accepted him not because they knew who he'd been, but because he never pretended to be anyone he wasn't. One morning, while shaving over a basin outside, Samuel caught his reflection and paused. The face that stared back was older, bearded, weathered by war and weather, but peaceful. It was the face of a man who no longer carried another man's ghosts. The boy, Daniel, came running up the path with a wooden sword. "You promised to teach me how to stand like a real soldier," he said, breathless. Samuel knelt. "Soldiers don't stand to fight," he said. "They stand to protect. Remember that." The boy nodded solemnly and raised his toy sword with pride. The widow arrived shortly after, carrying apples and fresh-washed linen. "You've changed," she said, watching him with a strange, soft look. "No, maybe not changed, just revealed." Samuel looked down. "I still wake up sometimes thinking I'm bleeding in the mud." "That part of you isn't weakness," she said. "It's what makes you careful with what you hold now." He looked up, eyes meeting hers. "And what if I want to hold you?" She didn't flinch. "Then do it right. Not out of loneliness, out of choice." He reached out, touched her hand, rough fingers brushing soft skin. It felt like the first honest touch of his life. "I never knew love without fear," he said. "Maybe that's what I buried with my name." She smiled. "Then let something grow in its place." That evening, they danced barefoot in the grass, just the three of them, to the hum of crickets and the distant creek. No music but their laughter, no witnesses but the stars. Samuel didn't know what future waited. Didn't need to. He had planted something true in soil that once knew only blood. And when he looked up at the sky, he whispered to himself, "This is the home I died for. Not the one I lost, but the one I built from what was left." Autumn came with gold leaves and long shadows, and Samuel stood on the porch with a steaming cup in hand, watching Daniel chase crows through the orchard they'd planted together. The wind carried the scent of pine and something sweeter, belonging. Behind him, the widow, Anna, was humming as she kneaded bread, the kind of sound that only grows where sorrow has been softened by time. Samuel stepped down into the yard, each step steady now, the crutch long forgotten in the corner of the barn. He moved like a man who had chosen to stay, not like one who had nowhere else to go. That evening, he gathered them around the fire. The leaves rustled above, and the flames danced like memory. "There's something I want to ask," he said, eyes on Anna. She turned, her hands still in her lap. "Then ask." He took a breath. "I gave up my name because it was built on things that failed me. But now I want a new one. One that's earned, not inherited." She nodded slowly. "What do you want to be called?" He looked at Daniel, then at her. "Yours." Her eyes filled, not with surprise, but with certainty. "Then you are." Daniel leaned into his side. "Can I take your name too?" "You already have," Samuel said, voice thick with something that wasn't grief. "Not anymore." The town gathered days later under the willow by the river. No priest, no vows scripted by someone else. Just 3 hands joined, one family born from ashes, the town bearing witness not to a marriage, but a resurrection. They called him Samuel Rivers now, a name chosen for the flow he followed, for the peace he chased, for the life he built when everything else was gone. He never returned to the house where Clara broke him. Never needed to. That fire had burned itself out, and in its place was green, wild, honest life. And when he finally closed his eyes at night, he didn't hear gunfire. He heard footsteps in the hallway, bread on the table, a child's laughter at dawn. Home wasn't a place he'd lost. It was a truth he'd forged from betrayal, war, and the strength to begin again. And this time, no one could take it from him.